It's listed as a brooch. In the archives, an inventory number, carat weight, place of origin. On paper, just a piece of jewelry. But if you closely trace when and on whom it appeared, you'll notice something unsettling. This stone was only worn by those going through personal crises. It surfaced in photos taken during the most uncomfortable royal visits. It disappeared right before scandals and returned when silence spoke louder than words. We've gathered dozens of documents, photographs, and eyewitness accounts, and they all suggest one thing: this diamond behaves like a witness. Why did the Queen hand it over outside royal protocol? Who did it really belong to? And why did Queen Camilla return it to the crown when she had countless other stones to choose from? This is not the official story of the Cullinan Bee. This is an investigation into why this jewel was never meant to survive to our time. The final frames aren't about the stone. They're about the person who was never the same after touching it. Deep beneath the surface, buried among the ancient layers of South African soil, where countless tons of rock had lain undisturbed for centuries, a single strike of a pickaxe in January 1905 changed the course of history. At the premier No. 2 mine near the small town of Cullinan, miners uncovered something they initially mistook for a piece of glass. But it quickly became clear this wasn't glass. It was the largest diamond ever found. Weighing an astonishing 3,106 carats, more than 620 grams, it was larger than a clenched fist. Even the most seasoned geologists and miners stood frozen. It was as if the Earth itself had chosen to gift humanity something beyond comprehension. The stone was named Cullinan after Thomas Cullinan, chairman of the mining company that owned the site. But the discovery posed a dilemma: what to do with it? In 1905, no technology could guarantee the safe cutting of a stone so massive and structurally complex. And although the diamond caused a sensation in London, months passed, then years, and no one dared to buy it. The fear was simple: one wrong move, and the world's greatest treasure would be reduced to glittering dust. It wasn't until 1907 that the Cullinan found a new owner, not through auction, nor through secretive deals, but as a political gesture. The government of the British Transvaal colony decided to present the Cullinan as a gift to King Edward VII. It was an act of loyalty and diplomacy, but also of symbolism. No other monarch in the world owned anything like it. The gift made headlines across the empire. One name echoed throughout Britain: Cullinan. Within the royal court, a new challenge emerged. Who could possibly cut the stone? The Cullinan wasn't just enormous, it was structurally unpredictable, riddled with internal tensions and natural fractures. A single miscalculated strike could destroy it forever. What was needed was not just skill, but vision, nerve, and absolute precision. Eventually, all eyes turned to the Asher brothers in Amsterdam, legendary diamond cutters whose reputation already extended across Europe's royal houses. But even they didn't accept the commission immediately. They spent months analyzing the stone, studying every internal flaw and pressure point. They built models, rehearsed techniques. They waited for the one perfect angle. In April 1908, the moment of truth arrived. In total silence, under the watchful eyes of officials and experts, Joseph Asher, the eldest of the brothers, positioned the blade with surgical precision. He knew this wouldn't be just a cut. It would be a moment that would be remembered for centuries. He struck. A dry, sharp crack echoed through the room. The stone split perfectly, exactly as planned. According to legend, Joseph Asher fainted on the spot from the sheer tension and relief. Even a master of his craft couldn't bear the pressure. From that single rough diamond came 9 major stones, named Cullinan 1 through Cullinan 9, along with dozens of smaller fragments. The 2 largest, Cullinan 1, known as the Great Star of Africa, and Cullinan 2, were immediately sent to London. One became the centerpiece of the royal scepter, the other the imperial state crown. The remaining stones stayed in Amsterdam for a while as a symbolic payment for the asher's unmatched craftsmanship. Eventually, most were purchased by the South African government and given to the British royal family. But the most fascinating part of the story had yet to unfold. Because one of those stones, small but cut in the shape of a heart, would go on to become more than just a royal jewel. It would witness quiet gestures, unspoken decisions, and emotions that were never meant to be revealed. It would rest for decades just over the hearts of queens. When the Cullinan diamond was finally split, revealing 9 primary stones, each began its own journey. The largest, Cullinan 1, weighing 530 carats, was mounted atop the royal scepter. Cullinan 2, nearly as impressive, was set into the imperial state crown. These 2 would become global symbols of royal power, visible, ceremonial, and instantly recognizable. But away from coronations and thrones, another story quietly began to take shape, far more personal and arguably more enduring. The remaining stones, Cullinan 3 through I, were not immediately delivered to the king. They remained in Amsterdam in the hands of the Asher brothers as part of their compensation for taking on what many considered an impossible task. But that arrangement didn't last long. The South African government soon bought back most of the stones and presented them to the British royal family, all except for Cullinan 6, which King Edward VII personally purchased for Queen Alexandra, a private gesture, intimate and deliberate, as if he wished to touch each piece of the legacy himself. Yet the true transformation of the Cullinan stones did not happen in scepters or crowns. It happened in the quiet, almost invisible realm of royal jewelry, the pieces worn close to the body, where diamonds become part of the person, not just their image. Among these, Cullinan 3, 4, and V were entrusted to Garrett, the royal jeweler for generations, with a unique task, not simply to frame the stones in gold or platinum, but to craft something alive, adaptable, changeable, responsive to time and moment. What emerged from their workshop would become some of the most iconic and emotionally loaded jewels in the royal collection. The first of these was a piece that would later be known as the Lesser Stars of Africa, a composition of Cullinan 3, a 94-carat pear-shaped diamond, and Cullinan 4, a square-cut stone of 63 carats. Together, they formed a pair that did not scream opulence. It radiated balance, understated yet unforgettable. And then came Cullinan V, smaller but cut in the shape of a heart, 18.8 carats, full of quiet symbolism. It was placed at the center of a brooch designed for Queen Mary as part of a magnificent stomacher, an elaborate, wide bodice ornament created for the Delhi Durbar of 1911, one of the British Empire's most grandiose events. But this brooch was no ordinary jewel. It was a mechanism constructed in a way that allowed other diamonds, like Cullinan 3rd and 4th, to be added or removed depending on the occasion. It was not a static object. It was jewelry that could speak. That adaptability made it unlike anything else in the royal vault. At times, it was delicate and personal. Other times, it transformed into a centerpiece of royal grandeur. It could whisper or declare, but it always meant something. Queen Mary, known for her obsessive attention to detail and symbolism, adored the piece. She wore Cullinan 4 in various forms, as a pendant, as part of a tiara, or integrated into other brooches. But it was Cullinan 5 that became her quiet favorite. Sometimes she wore it alone, sometimes as part of a larger set, but always with intention. Over time, the brooch evolved beyond its physical form. It became a language, worn just above the heart, a private message, visible only to those who knew how to read it. And when Queen Mary passed it on to her granddaughter, a young woman who had yet to learn the full weight of the crown, she wasn't simply passing on a diamond. She was passing on a memory, a responsibility, and a secret that could be worn but never spoken aloud. The story of Cullinan V didn't end with Queen Mary, nor did it pause with her generation. That heart-shaped diamond passed from hand to hand, but it never lost its meaning. When it came into the possession of a young Princess Elizabeth, future Queen Elizabeth II, it was already more than a jewel. It was a presence. At first, she wore it rarely, perhaps out of modesty, perhaps because even then she felt its weight, not physical, but symbolic. This was no ordinary piece of royal jewelry. It held something deeper, something unspoken. Over time, Cullinan V began to appear more often, subtly, quietly, not as an ornament, but as a signal. Queen Elizabeth II made it part of her visual language, her signature style. Simple pearl earrings, a triple strand of pearls, a classic coat or dress, and always on her left shoulder, that brooch. It wasn't habit, it was deliberate. Cullinan V accompanied her on royal tours, at state banquets, diplomatic meetings, opening ceremonies, Christmas speeches, and in more private, seemingly insignificant moments that mattered only to her. One of the most intimate stories connected to the brooch took place during a state visit to the Netherlands. There, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip visited the old Asher workshops, the same place where the original Cullinan diamond had been split decades earlier. During a quiet conversation with Louis Asher, descendant of Joseph Asher, the man who first struck the diamond, something remarkable happened. The Queen, for the very first time wearing Cullinan V in public, calmly removed it from her shoulder and placed it in his hands. Just for a moment. No photographers, no speeches, just a silent exchange between two people who understood what it meant to hold that stone. A full circle. As the years passed, the Queen began to wear the brooch more freely. Sometimes she combined it with Cullinan VI, worn as a pendant. Sometimes she added Cullinan VIII to create a larger composition. But most of the time, she wore Cullinan V alone. And that, in itself, said everything. The older she became, the more often it appeared. Not just during major ceremonies, but in moments when stability mattered. The brooch wasn't decorative, it was reassurance. At Princess Eugenie's wedding in 2018, the Queen wore it again, quietly, without comment. In 2019, she chose it for the state opening of Parliament during one of the most politically uncertain periods in recent British history. In both moments, the message was clear. I am here, I remain. But nothing prepared the world for its most unexpected appearance. During the Platinum Jubilee, millions watched the now iconic scene, Queen Elizabeth II sitting down for tea with Paddington Bear, warm, simple, disarmingly human. And there it was, Cullinan V, glimmering softly on the lapel of her dark coat. For many, that moment, so quiet, so casual, became one of the Queen's final public appearances. And she chose that brooch. No fanfare, no farewell speech, just the heart-shaped diamond, witnessing her goodbye. In the months that followed, it vanished from view, but not from memory, because by then, its story no longer needed to be told aloud. It had already become part of something much greater, a legacy written in light. As the years passed, Each appearance of Cullinan V told a new story. No longer just a diamond discovered in Africa or a masterpiece cut by a legendary craftsman, it had become part of something greater, a symbol, a presence, a whisper of continuity. When Queen Elizabeth II reached the mature years of her reign, the heart-shaped brooch began to accompany her more frequently. It was no longer just an inherited treasure. It was a signal, a choice, a part of her daily language. And what made it even more remarkable was how unassuming it always appeared. Despite its immense value and royal origin, the Cullinan V never screamed wealth. It didn't need to. In its quiet elegance and modest size, it felt intimate, almost humble. And perhaps that's why it spoke so powerfully. The Queen wore it during Christmas broadcasts, state receptions, royal weddings, diplomatic meetings, but also on quieter days. It didn't need a grand stage, because it carried its own meaning. One of the most tender appearances was during Princess Eugenie's wedding in 2018. A family celebration, warm, simple, deeply personal. And there it was, Cullinan V, a small but steady light. It said, without words, "I'm here. This is still home." The following year, the Queen wore the same brooch during the state opening of Parliament, at a time of political instability and public uncertainty. And once again, she didn't explain her choice. She didn't need to, because that small diamond radiated calm in ways no speech could. But the most unforgettable appearance of all came a little later. During the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, millions of people around the world watched a surprise video. Queen Elizabeth having tea with Paddington Bear. A moment full of humor, tenderness, and charm. And there, on her coat, Cullinan V, not drawing attention to itself, yet impossible to miss for those who knew what it meant. That brief scene, so seemingly lighthearted, became one of her final public moments, and she chose that brooch. No words, no formal farewell, just the diamond, watching, just the heart, quietly present, a silent witness to the end of a chapter. Then, in 2023, Cullinan V returned to the crown, literally. It was reset into Queen Mary's crown, replacing the replica of the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond. This time, it would sit atop the head of Queen Camilla during the coronation of King Charles III. It was a symbolic decision, elegant, historic, and deliberate, as if to say, the story isn't broken, it continues. In the spring of 2024, Camilla wore the Cullinan V brooch publicly for the first time during a garden party at Buckingham Palace. No announcement, no press release, just a quiet reappearance, noticed only by those who understood its weight. That single image was enough. The brooch had returned to the light, and with it, the story began its next chapter. Every time the Cullinan V reappears, it does so not as a jewel, but as a reminder. That power doesn't always shout. That memory has weight, and that some symbols outlast everything because they carry the heartbeat of those who wore them. When Cullinan V reappeared, pinned to Queen Camilla's jacket during the first annual garden party at Buckingham Palace in 2024, something shifted. It wasn't a fashion choice. It was a statement, quiet but undeniable. Continuity endures. And the heart of that diamond still beats. For those who knew the history, that moment spoke louder than any speech. The brooch hadn't vanished into a vault. It hadn't been sealed behind glass. It hadn't become a relic of a previous reign. It had returned to where it belongs, the shoulder of a queen. As Camilla stepped into her role as queen consort, she didn't just inherit a crown. She inherited the symbols, the visible threads that have silently woven the monarchy's story for generations. And among them, Cullinan V carries one of the most emotionally resonant legacies. Diamonds have always symbolized power, wealth, and permanence, but this one, with its heart-shaped cut, its cool shimmer, and its restrained setting, carries a different message. It does not dazzle to impress. It doesn't demand attention. Instead, it speaks of memory, silence, and grace. Now, Cullinan V enters a new chapter. In 2023, it was once again set into Queen Mary's crown, replacing the replica of the contentious Koh-i-Noor diamond. And it was with this very crown that Queen Camilla was crowned beside King Charles III in Westminster Abbey. The choice wasn't accidental. It was thoughtful, symbolic, as if to say, this story has not ended. It continues with care. Then, in spring 2024, Camilla wore Cullinan V as a brooch, not on a throne, not in a speech, but at a garden party. No fanfare, no official explanation, only a quiet return, visible only to those who knew what to look for. And it was more than enough, because Cullinan V no longer needs introduction. Its presence speaks for itself. It lives not through drama, but through its stillness, through its ability to remain when everything else changes. It does not just survive, it endures. Its power lies not in its carats or its price, though both are immense, but in its resilience. It has outlasted wars, abdications, global shifts, personal heartbreaks, and the passing of monarchs. And through it all, it has never lost its meaning. Because Cullinan V is not just a jewel, it is a thread in the fabric of royal memory, a silent witness to love, duty, grief, and legacy. And every time it returns to view, whether as a brooch, a crown, or a whisper of light, it doesn't just tell a story about the past, it reminds us of the people who wore it and the weight they carried. No one knows where it will appear next, or on whose shoulder, but one thing is certain, its story is far from over.